plan to order. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll do a roll call,
I will.
please.
Jerry Dobin. Zane Bedore.
Here.
Mark Flum.
Here.
Ed Harrell.
Here.
Carl Hilton.
Yep.
Jason Waterman.
Here.
Gabe Nobby.
Here.
Brian Jennings.
Here.
James Barrett.
Here.
All here except Jerry Dobin.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Glad to see it in attendance. You've had a chance to look at the minutes of the last meeting. And if so, I need approval, a motion to approve it, please.
Can you change my name from Jane to Zane?
Oh.
We might change it to several things for you. You can approve that, right?
I move to approve with that change.
Are you serious?
We have a motion and a second, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
All in favor of our most important motion tonight, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Yep, there you guys go. Brenda can sign that for me.
So the minutes are approved.
Thank you.
More hands in good.
Okay, ready to ask someone for a motion to go ahead and go through the discussion with the satellite manure facility out of the annual plan discussion.
Look, I've been asked this due to the people here and in respect to their time to move discussion on the chicken manure into item, after item 3A, I guess I can call it. Kind of motion to that effect, please.
So moved. Second.
Moved in second, all in favor of making that change in the agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay.
Okay. Now, I'm pretty sure all the Plan Commission members are aware of the issues that are related to a proposed satellite manure storage facility up along Newman Lake Road up in Wayne County. And that, as I mentioned in my communications with the Plan Commission members, that there's going to end up eventually be a petition by some citizens to look at some type of regulations related to the siting of a satellite manure storage. And it's what our guest here this evening is about with this. I know I was at the first meeting, as was Mr. Bedore, and the last meeting is for the residents. I know Mr. Flum was. And was anybody else on the Plan Commission at that meeting?
No.
Okay. And so I think that what brought this all
Everybody here okay? Okay.
What brought all this to a head is that I know there's someone who can speak, give you a little bit more background information than I can, is intimately more understanding of what's happened with why this is coming into the state of Indiana from Ohio. But what I provided is back behind the minutes, There's a copy of the memo I prepared for the actual commissioners. And what we have is, it has copies of the information from the Indiana statutes concerning the satellite manure storage structures. And what that is about about regulating. And then there's also the definition of what defines as a manure storage facility, and includes both, for example, includes both lagoons, and it also actual buildings. Also included as far as the manure, the reference from the State Chemist Office rules for the staging of manure. So the rules, at this point in time, the only planner that I've been able to speak with that for a jurisdiction that has adopted any type of rules concerning the actual manure storage, the satellite facilities, is Wells County. And I provided what they had at the back of that, what their rules from their zoning code. And the one that they actually regulate as a CFO is are the lagoons. So my specific question to the planner in Wells County was, what about buildings? Said if it's going to be a storage in the building, the way they look at those right now, the way the rules are written, is they treat it like any other agricultural accessory building. And then right after that is, I provided there's an office from some information from the Indiana State Chemist and Seed Commissioner's Office, and it has their rules. And so it just runs through at the bottom of page 1 of their rules, get into, okay. That may, oh, here you go, John. I noticed that there's a couple of them that didn't have it so at the bottom of page 1, it has what the staging restrictions are for the manure. And this has to do with the setbacks and time frames as far as with the manure. And it has the rest of the rules as far as the applications. Then they have themselves some frequently asked questions toward the back of it. And so that's just in the short of what I actually, what little bit I do have so far as related to the satellite storage. So before anybody else in the audience speaks, does any of the members of the Plan Commission have any questions for me? Or anybody has some comments from the Plan Commission at this point?
I reviewed what we had there as far as what they've used as far as the 72 hours,
Okay, all right.
so everybody knows.
Yeah. So what's in place is, this is for the staging just of the manure. And the manure must be staged at least 300 feet from surface waters, drainage inlets, or water wells, unless it's covered or there's a gradient barrier that contains or directs any manure away from surface waters, drainage inlets, or water wells. And what they're just as a gradient barrier, essentially it's a berm. Okay, and it's
Just a brim.
yeah, berm. It's on an area with it must not be staged on an area with a slope greater than 6% unless run-on and runoff are controlled, or on any standing water, waterway, or floodway. Manure as staged for more than 72 hours must be protected by a cover or gradient barrier. Setback from property lines 100 feet. Setback from public roads 100 feet. Setback from residential buildings 400 feet, and applied within 90 days. So there's, you can see some of my notes that I jotted. So I do have some questions that I'm putting together that I need to ask with both IDEM concerning, the rules that they're hopefully proposing soon. Someone out there may be able to answer, that question about timing. But as far as their rules, and then the rules on the part of the State Chemist Office. So if anybody in the meantime with any Plan Commission members, any questions related to this that would be helpful for you to, number one, understand the issues and understanding their rules. If you can get those to me so I can then also ask those of people in those two offices.
What kind of cover are we talking about?
That is, I don't think it actually specifically defines what it means with a cover. I would assume it's something that's impervious, but I really can't answer that question.
But if you were to dig a berm, and you're basically keeping it from going outside of that, and you dig down a hole and you set it on top of that hole, if there's nothing under it, it's still going to sink into the ground.
Would be some percolation, yeah.
Yeah.
Are we talking just dry manure satellite places, or are we talking drains as well?
This is in reference to both the, the rules with the state is both the dry and then also the liquid.
And these are both heavily regulated by IDAM, correct?
Okay, the IDAM is, if it's more than 5,000 cubic yards, they require a permit. And then it has the actual volume there for the liquid storage. Okay, then for the actual IDAM rules for the permits. Okay, at least 1 million gallons of manure for the liquid manure, and at least 5,000 cubic yards of the manure, that'd be the dry manure, such as with the chicken manure.
So if it's under that, then it doesn't have to go through the IDAM process at all?
No. So it's the, so IDAM doesn't permit it, it doesn't require a permit, it requires someone to put it down. And, but they still have to then store it and stage it in the way that the chemist office requires. And so it also has information in what I passed out also on the, some of the rules on the actual application and so on. So like I said, if board members have some questions or anything like that that they want me to ask, or if there's anything with you, Gabe, as through your job as the ag instructor out at the school, that would be helpful also.
Question that comes to my mind, here's the rules. They're laid out pretty clear. How is it policed?
That's the, there's a, as far as, I know there's a manure hotline. Beyond that, I really don't have an answer to that question.
Isn't it policed through IDAM and the state chemist?
Yeah, it's actually through, it's,
Malin Whitaker,
Yeah.
only by complaint,
yeah,
Yeah, that's,
otherwise,
that's,
nothing happens.
yeah.
They don't look at it at all.
So there's no follow-up, any follow-through, anything along with that. Whether or not there's following through with their
that's how you get
the manure application plans or storage plans.
Where there's licensing, I believe that they actually.
Oh, if you could introduce yourself to everybody.
My name is Malin Whitaker. I have a place called Newman Lake on Newman Lake Road, and became aware that satellite manure storage was going to happen back in September, ironically from a farmer who was concerned about the quality of his water. And there are a number of issues that I think the Planning Commission might want to look at. And number one, that because this person has picked a below than 5,000 cubic foot, or at least made that statement is where he's at, the regulations, there's nothing. As I pointed out to my own council up there in Wayne County, it'll be the first thing you smell and the last thing you remember about Connorsville when you come and go out of the north end of it. We had a meeting last Thursday where people from Grand Lake St. Mary's, which was once a popular tourist destination, literally hundreds of thousands of people went up there during the year, as well as to an Ohio park on it. We were told that essentially property values are at half, that one person who was at the meetings had their house for sale for 4 years, has had no one look at it. The problem with this type of manure is it is in the farming industry what we call hot. It's very high in nitrogen, phosphorus, as well as having bacteria in it, E. coli, salmonella. Also has viruses in it. There's a US EPA report out as of July 2013, which might be very helpful, and I apologize for not being able to quote chapter and verse the number it's from, but I can get that to you, Mr. Daniel.
Okay, well, what Barbara's always, has already forwarded me some information in an email, which is something that I will end up getting a copy of, at least all these links on electronically to all the Plan Commission members.
But my concern is that the watershed, in addition to me having to smell it because I'm down in the valley, the unique topography or the layout of the land there is such that the field above us is about 40 feet higher, and a natural cut from the glaciers is where Newman Lake actually lays in the valley there. And when you drive by and look at my lakes there, you're literally looking at the water table. And you're looking at ultimately, because the water flows south, that's the water that Connersville ultimately will have to pump, purify, and drink. Connersville's already had issues because of manufacturing issues here and chemicals in the groundwater. And E. coli in particular, as far as the Department of Health, is a huge issue for those who have septic tanks and these type of things. And the Water Conservation District is trying to address that here with proper containment of septic tanks and sewage. And ironically, because of the way this gentleman has structured this, he's going to be applying E. coli to the fields where the rains are going to fall and run off into the creeks, among other things that's in it. As the example of Grand Lake St. Mary's shows, is that it became so hot or toxic in the Grand Lake St. Mary's area that they literally shut down the lake. They put up signs, no drinking, no swimming, no fishing, no boating, basically, and that's because the nutrients in that area had made the lake literally toxic. I mean, if you care to see pictures of it, there are, dead ducks and fish and that sort of thing, because the algae blooms so much and it toxifies the water. Obviously destroying their industry as well, which was a tourist industry. As the gentleman pointed out, Mr. Ringo, Bill Ringo, who's the head of the Grand Lake St. Mary's Homeowners Association, he said that the Ohio Park across the way was offering camping sites for half price all year, not just in the winter, because they couldn't get anybody to come there. What's the point to go look at the Mossy Lake? But my concern is that, and to step back a little bit, we always, in the area, and I think as a general rule here in Fayette and Wayne counties, is we've tried to be good neighbors. And if I had a problem with somebody, I could have talked to them and said, please, don't do that. And he might disagree, but we'd get along. In this particular case, I was given a pretty serious shutdown when talking to the gentleman, Mr. Myers. When I asked him about the facility, I also asked him why he didn't put it near his house in Union County. At which point he told me to do something to myself that I can't do, and I won't include all the expletives. So I find that the governments, local governments and planning commissions, you're trying to develop industry here, you're trying to have a quality of life, and you're trying to sustain the property values in a very difficult economy. I've always tried to be a good steward. Anything that I would do at my lake, ultimately, Connersville is going to have to drink. So I use no poisons, and I use no very limited applications of fertilizer and this type of thing, because it's important. I know you guys are going to get it eventually, and I just want to be a good steward. But I find that at the county and local level that you're caught flat-footed by this event. I think it's important for you to know, why is this happening now? Because Grand Lake St. Mary's is so polluted and so destroyed, the Ohio EPA and the federal EPA have agreed that they may continue in production, but they must export, that's a quote out of the Ohio report, their problem out of the watershed area. So ironically, we are the receiving end of the export. I realize that the agriculture industry is under a lot of pressure to produce, high land prices and cost of equipment, etc. But at the same time, I feel that there's an obligation to your neighbors, your friends, and the quality. You're a steward of the land, not just an owner of the land. And making money isn't at whatever cost to everybody around you is not correct. So from a planning commission's point of view, I would say that the value of your property, the health of your community, all is at stake
by this gap, this 5,000 gap, 5,000 cubic yards is a lot of stuff, okay? It's a huge amount. There are also other issues with it as well, as I said, viruses, bacteria, and then these elements. And gentlemen, once phosphor gets into the ground, as was pointed out by our guest speaker last Thursday, it stays there, it's an element, it doesn't go away. Another thing that's in the chicken feed is arsenic. I actually was stunned to find that arsenic was being fed to chickens, but in these confined areas for the chickens and turkeys, they get a disease by being so confined and so, they just sit and eat, that the arsenic apparently is used to overcome a condition that they would normally get. The arsenic doesn't affect them because the chickens only live for a few months. However, arsenic is accumulative. Again, it's an element, it doesn't go away. So there are issues here, and I hope that you will look to address it, because right now it could happen to you here, and I'm sure that you have ag use permits that you give out as well. Ironically, the gentleman told our planning commission in Wayne County that it was for equipment storage. And the entrance for the road was a field entrance. Well, when we're talking large trucks going in and out multiple times a day, going everywhere, that's a little more than a field entrance. And the other thing is the question about your own roads. I know you struggle to keep them up, as Wayne County does. It's very expensive, and these trucks are going to be going in. They're dump trucks, long type dump trucks like you might see at the grain elevator. There's no provision for him to have a well there nor any electricity. The trucks would be neither cleaned out, and I can't picture him in there with a whisk broom sweeping them out carefully. And they're going to be going up and down this road. And if you've ever followed a hay wagon, you'll get an idea of what this might be like. Secondly, is that because of the unique layout, Newman Lake Road in Wayne County is used by Fayette County school buses to get from one side of the county to the other. So during school season, we would have children in the buses going up and down the road where the chicken manure is littered up and down the road. And so it's a health issue. We also have a lot of citizens there, and their homes are their investment. They're not in the stock market, they're not in bonds or anything else. It's their investment. Many of them's health is fragile. The overpowering smell of chicken manure, perhaps those who've been in the county for a long time can remember that there used to be an item called the Cackle House on Waterloo Road that Riches had, and when they would open the doors and spread the chicken manure, you knew it for a number of days. So I hope that you'll try and address this, which seems to be a gap, and you are literally being dumped on. There's no question of it. I'm a steward of the land. I happen to own it right now, but it'll go on to somebody else, and that water coming underneath my property in the Whitewater River and in Newman Lake, y'all are going to drink it, and I try and keep that in mind every time I do anything. Yeah. Appreciate anything you can help us with on this.
Thank you.
There's been a lot, I think everybody pretty much knows what's going on here. I think as an area planning, there's two things we should do. And I'm gonna make a motion that we do the one, and then I'll talk about the second one. But the first one, I think manure storages should be, in this county, could fall under the same guidelines as what a CAFO falls under. Because the two elements that a CAFO causes is the smell and the waste. And these both of these elements are in a manure storage. So I make a motion that in this county, we follow the manure storage follows under the same guidelines, setbacks as what the CAFOs has to follow in this county.
We have a motion. You have it down? Do we have a second?
Any discussion?
Discussion on the motion?
There's no second.
There's no second, as of right now.
So
we need a
if-
second, right?
If it falls under a CAFO,
If there's no second, can't discuss it,
You know, can't discuss.
so it should die.
Once again, do we have a second?
If you want to discuss
No?
it. Second it, if you want to discuss it.
And that passes it, no? I'll second it, because I want to talk about it.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We should have discussion first.
Yeah, discussion first, that's correct.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Discussion?
If it falls under a CAFO, can we even do that? Because the state has its own
Okay, now,
guidelines.
as I mentioned, is the only one I've come across so far that is actually regulating as a CAFO, as well as county. But that's they're only regulating the actual lagoons. And so what they do is, the ones that, they're even applying it to the ones that are below the IDAM regulatory threshold. But what they're requiring is it still has to run through their point system. Now, but what they're actually requiring then on those are the same type of drawings, the same engineering as the lagoons for an actual, one that would fall under the actual CAFO.
Right.
So they're just applying those then actually to the satellite lagoons. Now, as far as any structure for the dry storage, such as what we're, the issue with the chicken manure up there in the area of Newman Lake Road and what's being brought into Indiana, is that they treat those like an accessory building. So and I haven't had a conversation, direct conversation, just some emails back and forth. So I haven't had a conversation as what is the rationale behind only the lagoons versus the, things like the chicken manure. So that's something that's a question I need to ask, and I need to have as far as an actual conversation.
A comment to this motion. If you set up the thing just like CAFOs, then basically you've taken all animal agriculture out of the county, even forage projects. Because all animal projects have to have a manure management plan according to state and national guidelines. So if you have a heifer, you have to treat it like a CAFO. Now, if you treat that like a CAFO, that means every heifer cannot be within a half mile of a home. There are 2 places in this county that will happen. So that means all the animals that are in this county basically are not allowed to be in here now because we don't allow CAFOs where they are. That's the first point. Second point, the manure is used as fertilizer, which is an organic fertilizer. You hear a lot of push towards organics and use of organics versus a chemical fertilizer. The fertilizer that is applied to fields now is a petroleum-based fertilizer, and it's used for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are chemicals that leach out of the soil and into water supplies and things like that. They do not stay in the soil. Phosphorus leaves. If it didn't leave, then farmers wouldn't apply it because they wouldn't need it. It leaves in the form of the kernels of corn and in the soybeans, and it also leaves through leaching into the water supply, which is probably part of the problem with St. Mary's. What happened down there, or up there, they had water getting into the manure, it leached out, the nitrates went into the water supply, creating an algae bloom. The algae bloom died, that killed off the oxygen, or sucks all the oxygen out as it's breaking down, and that kills the fish. So that's what's happening in that situation. I would definitely be highly against this motion. I mean, I can't stress enough, because every person that had an animal in this county would no longer be able to do that under this proposed motion.
Well, one, I haven't used chicken litter on my farms for the last 4 or 5 years. I did not apply it last year because after I run the soil test, it was not needed. I didn't need it, so I didn't apply it. I think the most I've ever heard applied, the most I've applied is 3 tons per acre. And only when it was needed that much. I've heard as much as 4 tons have been applied in other places. Last year, we had a few places that could have taken 1 ton, but we looked at the cost of chicken litter versus regular fertilizer, and we went with regular fertilizer because it wasn't worth that. And so I've used it, and I would like to still continue to use it, but only after the soil test proves is needed.
Well, I agree. Sorry.
Go on, I'm done.
I agree with what you're saying. We can't go that far. That's why I wanted discussion on it. But the other thing is correct me if I'm wrong, that we're talking about farmers, people who do this. I think on the other side of this, we're talking about corporations. There's a corporation behind this push. So there's a way to regulate it, but not cut everybody's throat in the county that's a farmer, and I agree with that, as far as we can't, that's off the charts. But it does need to be regulated somehow when somebody's got a lot of money behind it and they know there's no regulation, and we're just gonna sit here and take it.
I think one of the main concerns that we have to be concerned about is to what extent the local government agencies are preempted by state law. Because if state law has addressed the problem, we have to live with that. Home rule allows us to deal with problems in our local governments that aren't already addressed by state law or by the state constitution. And that's why we have to be careful, because we can't get into areas that the state's already preempted. We have to be able to define what has and what hasn't been.
We have a question.
Comment?
My comment is I grew up farming, and I realize that rules and regulations have changed a lot, and this is not against the farmer. What I see is that we've got a toxic project over in Grand
I don't
St.
know.
Mary's.
That's messed up over there.
That's a quote from the.
It's messed up over there.
But it's messed up. The thing is I don't want Fayette County, Wayne County, or any county to become a dumping ground, and I think that what we're asking for is not the responsibility, like Mr. Flum's talking about. He says, he went out and tested it, he didn't use it. It makes economic sense and just common sense. But the actual creation of of a dumping area, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's the satellite storage, and maybe that's something to address without affecting the farmers. I'm a libertarian type of thing. If it neither breaks my leg nor picks my pocket, I don't care what you do next door. So, maybe with careful looking into it legally and that sort of thing, that may be something you can do. But
We already seen it being in the county. I mean, you just heard Mr. Flum here say he applies it to his fields, and that's happening
not
frequently.
against it.
I
Not
mean,
against it.
so I mean, that's really not, the difference would be then the storage side. Now, we have to look at those at case-by-case basis. I don't know what's going on up there. But I think we have to look at those at case-by-case. I mean, and the state has statutes that are already set up for the large ones. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Brenda?
well, where are you gonna set the gap at? I mean, you gonna set the gap on a kid that has three steers for 4-H?
No
I
one in the Newman Lake area or Fayette County area, I would guess, would be trying to shut down a kid's 4-H project. I mean, that's a kind of over the top, but
But where do you set it at? That's what I'm saying.
when 6 trucks a day come in dumping chicken manure.
So you said at 6 trucks? I mean, is that what you're saying? I don't know.
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be flip, I'm just saying that the smell will be there, sir. And I tell you what, I mean, if you'd like, I can encourage Mr. Murray to put it near your home.
I think Barbara, or is it Barbara has a question?
If I could ask Brenda one thing real quick. Now, in that motion, I don't recall right offhand, did Mr. Flum emphasize the satellite storage?
Yes.
No, well, I guess I didn't write that
Yeah,
down.
satellite storage.
Yeah.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
See, I know Mr. Myers, and I foresee him, this is going to become a commercial business down the
Absolutely
road.
it is.
I believe positively it will be. Because he's a businessman, that's the way to make money, and that's what it's going to eventually be. And that becomes a whole different issue. That's a commercial business then, and
So
Will you
then at that
reword your
point, this is kind of moot then.
Need to reword the motion, please.
Will you reword it so I can make
Well,
sure I got it?
the
clear?
my question is, who's going to govern, who's going to oversee him and that's the
my
key.
original question.
I mean, if he always stays under this 5,000 cubic yards, the state's already got guidelines, we can't touch them. But who's gonna govern that watch it all the
That's my
time?
question.
That's what I'd like to know, how,
Let's
gonna do
let's
this?
let this speak.
Yeah, I just have a couple things.
Excuse me just a second,
I'm Barbara
ma'am.
Shaycox.
I'll get to it.
Oh,
She wants a motion repeated.
Just repeat it so I can make sure I know it right.
the way I originally stated it?
Yeah, I had this. go
What
ahead.
you want on the record.
Okay.
What did you-
How
what
do
did
you
you
have
have?
it written?
Manure establishments in Fayette County should fall into the same guidelines as CAFO of this county, is what I've got.
Yes, because of the two reasons, the problem, smell, and the possible contamination.
If you pass
I mean,
that though as
the
written,
product is there, still there.
if you pass that as written, establishment is a place that holds,
But there is a gap.
a place that, a manure spreader load. That's a place that holds it. So now we have to treat it like a CAFO?
No,
I've got about
A
40,
pad, you
I've got
know.
about 40 chickens, so that affects me.
Yeah, I mean, you got a little pad, you're putting.
And you know, every once in a while, I squirt chicken manure about twice a day.
But I think the emphasis is the whole thing's really about the satellite storage.
Then it needs to be in that,
And
because
then
you just put establishment.
out or otherwise.
So you would add satellite storage, I
is
guess.
satellite storage, yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're
manure
talking about satellite
establishments.
manure storage structures.
That's what I'm talking about.
Is that what your
Yes,
motion
that's
would be?
exactly.
Under 5,000 feet, correct? Under 5,000 cubic yards and under.
Well, we already got guidelines when it's under.
No, when it's over.
When it's over,
When it's
okay.
over. So it would have to be under.
Yeah, so ultimately, the question is we know the Wells County, on the liquid, they're actually doing with the liquid with the lagoons because they're constructed facilities.
Right, right.
So,
Okay. Here
I'm
comes-
sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
No, that's
No,
okay.
that's okay.
My name is Barbara Shea Cox, and I did quite a bit of research on this while I've been involved, and I go to IDM every other month for meetings, and so I've been very involved in this over the past 5 years. And I think the first thing is correct. It should be satellite. I'm a fourth generation farmer, and we all have it. So that is the key word, satellite manure storage. When I talked to Matt Pearson, who is in charge of the new system with our fertilizer advisory board that started out, our Lowe's was started out February. Indeed, they will have oversight over the licensing of anybody that does apply manure. And that means whether they're from Ohio, wherever they're from, they are to have a license. But when I talked to Matt about if they had any regulation over manure storage, these satellite manure storage buildings, he said no. Now we go into the fact that we lost home rule on manure applications for the county. So they oversee all manure applications. They have an enforcement person. They don't use the spillway. So they have that. But in working with IDEM, and I've been to Wells County a couple times, in working with IDEM, IDEM states that we still have home rule on the siting of these buildings. The actual siting is up to us. Now, there are 2 of these that came in 2009 and 2010 in county here. At the same time, we were putting in a new septic tank. We had to do soil samples, we did all that. 2 huge lagoons went in another county with absolutely no soil samples or anything. So anything under this 5,000 cubic yards or million-gallon manure is just the Wild Wild West. We have no regulation at all on it. No soil samples or anything. So I think that it's really important that you get setbacks for these satellite. And between the million gallon and the above the million gallon and the 5,000 cubic yards, you can still have the siting, the setbacks, as far as land use, is what Bruce Palin, who's the Assistant Commissioner of IDEM, has told me repeatedly. So I just think it's crucial that the land use is one of your main focuses, and especially for soil testing also, because there's so much to lose. And Equip Funds just started signing up this last week And it is definitely, you can use the QUIP funds to build these buildings. So it's an enticement for these commercial guys to go out and build. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Barbara brought up a good point. That was one of my intent to follow the CAFO, meaning it has to follow the setbacks. Means it can't be within, a mile of the city limits, a mile of a school, a mile of open waterways or hamlets. And that was my intent, to follow those guidelines, setbacks. That was my intent.
Just an omission.
Yeah.
Okay, other comments?
Question, do you have like a minimum size threshold so we don't get in
You have to have a minimum.
the
If you don't,
4-H heifer issue, or Ed's 40 chickens and...
I saw an article that if you had over 5 horses, you had to have.
You do. If
But
you got,
one heifer or 2 heifers, that doesn't fall under this guidelines, I don't think.
no, these guidelines, well,
No.
the way they're written now, it will, because now you have to have a manure management plan. Everybody's gotta have a manure management plan.
But that's if you have over so many livestock though, right? 1 or 2 doesn't.
You're supposed to have a manure management plan.
Mr. Flum, do you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, so if you use the word satellite in this proposal, that eliminates your concern about the 4-H project.
Well, it does and it doesn't. I mean, you still got a size requirement there. So if you're taking satellite from, let's say you have your heifers at one farm and you take it to another farm to store your manure, that's a satellite.
You're playing the what-if thing.
Well, that's what the government's for, is the what-if thing. If you're gonna set rules, you gotta make sure you have the what-if in there.
If you use the word satellite in there, you are protecting all the 4-H members that have got sheep, cattle, hogs, and
Well, I think you need to have minimums in there. If you don't have minimums, you're not gonna, if you don't have minimums in there, then it's whatever.
For your chickens, for your fish.
I'm not gonna do that to you.
Why can't it?
Wait till he finishes, please.
But I mean, why, I'm Phil Flum, and I didn't really come here to speak tonight, but I have wrestled with this issue when I was in the legislature, as a legislator for 10 years. And what do you do as an area planning commission to allow the industry to grow the way it's going to grow? The bottom line is, I live out there on the Bentonville Road, and when I first purchased that farm, my wife and I, you could drive from Indiana 1 to State Road 3, and there would be a hog in every field all that distance. Well, nowadays, all of those hogs are all piled in one big pile. Okay, now how do you allow, and it's not going to go back. We're not going to go back to where every farmer's got a couple chickens, a milk cow, and all of that. This is corporate America today, folks, whether you like it or not, that is doing this. I mean, we have 4 chicken farms over there in Ohio that are now so saturated that they're moving at the government, the federal government is subsidizing that stuff being trucked out of there. They are. Now, what I say is crucial in this here is setbacks. And I'll tell you why setbacks. We need to take into consideration the majority of people who lives in our community. Now, we're going to have CAFOs, and we're going to have CFOs, and we're going to have this and that and this and that. But this proposed site up here is being built, or going to be built, where there is a lot of people who lives there. If this was put out in the ruralest of areas, yes, some people are going to be affected. That's true. But here, you're almost talking about affecting an entire county, an entire community.
Gordon Estates.
Because, we have Gordon Estates up there.
Less than 2 miles from your city limits.
Yeah.
We have no control over that.
Listen, guys, let me say this. And I'll say it. We passed this 2-mile setback in the Indiana General Assembly 6 years ago. 66 to 33. in spite of a lot of opposition, you can figure out from who, we passed this in bipartisan support. Never mind, some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle got roughed up pretty hard for voting the way they voted. But this never even got a hearing in the Senate. That tells you the political will was not there to pass these setbacks. Is the political will up here to do that? Is it? Now, someone said to me, when I was doing this, and I said, well, we're going to come after you in the next election. Well, there are more people in the support of the way I saw it than there were in opposition. But what I'm trying to say to you folks is, these buildings are going to have to be built. They're going to have to be done the way they're done. But let's affect as few amount of people as possible. And you, sir, to bring up this what-if stuff, that's silliness.
That's what you're talking about, sir.
That's silly. When you become an attorney up here, and I think he's a competent, qualified attorney, you certainly could word that in such a way that you're not going to affect 4-H members.
We're passing a motion right now, sir. If you pass a motion that does not have defined limits, then government's going to do what government does. And government can run wild if you allow it. So if you set limits on it, I'm not saying I'm for or against it, I'm saying it has to have limits. So it's got to be between 5,000 and a minimum. That's all I'm asking.
I'm just saying, there's a way to word things that legally can be supported. And there's a way to write them in such a way that it cannot be.
If there's a motion on the floor, that is binding. We're not talking about something that it can be written. We're talking about a motion that is binding.
Your decision, but there's a way to word that in such a way that you're using the word satisfy. And even in order to protect 4-H members and your hogs, 2 hogs, 2 chickens, and 5 cats.
But where do we set the limit between
Thank you for your time.
0?
Thank you.
I've got a point I'd like to make. It would appear to me that the Area Plan Commission should at least consider the possibility of more research than we've done so far to give us a better platform to work from, because frankly, I haven't had a chance to really get into all these statutes and dig into it and determine exactly what the state has regulated and what's available for the local government to regulate. And I think we need to do that. I think we need to get into it and define what at least our legal parameters are, what we can do. And then, of course, this policy body has to decide what we will do as far as making a recommendation to the city council and county commissioners. But it would appear to me that would be a good place to start. I think we might be premature in making motions tonight, and that's just an observation.
I move to postpone this motion to research more information.
I have a motion to postpone the motion till the next regular meeting. That's what would be. Second? We have a second? All in favor of postponing the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion passed. Next. You up to speed?
Am I up to speed with what yet?
What are we going to be doing?
So that's just something we have to.
Okay. Bill's going to get us back on task, right?
Yep. Okay. Gentlemen?
Yes.
And, okay, now that we're back to discuss with, immediate track we're going to take as far as with the satellite manure storage. Okay, I think that's probably going to be, however long it's going to lead into probably the first part of the year. That should probably be one of the things to dealing with right off the bat with next year's the annual plan. Because whatever is in place we have as far as information ready on for the December meeting, something will still need to be put together, still need to be instructed to prepare any type of ordinance if that is gonna be the decision of the Area Plan Commission, and it'll still have to be put together then for a public hearing.
Then what do you need now?
Okay, well, right now is that, this gets back to the actions for the annual plan. Now, we have several things that,
Well, in that regard to,
which?
what we'll discuss.
Okay, I think that should be, the highest priority because we know it's gonna bleed into the first part of next year. So that's gonna be, priority number one with the annual plan because we know it's gonna bleed through. So, what this is doing is, it's really with the annual plan, it's the emphasizing the focus of my activities, through the course of the year. And so I think one item right now we need to, as far as probably the highest priority with the annual plan for next year, which I'll have a draft also in December, will be to, prepare it, if the decision is made by the entire board, to develop regulations as far as for the siting of not confined feeding, but for the satellite manure storage. That will be priority one. Now, what we get into is we have a series of items in the comprehensive plan for the, to try to move forward with at least taking care of what the Area Plan Commission can with the comprehensive plan. Now, ironically, with this discussion is of course, I did have the satellite manure storage facilities as a additional action, is the recommendation as far as looking at urban agriculture. Now, Gabe, I recently had a lady, maybe about a month ago, came into my office. She was asking about city rules as far as urban agriculture. Did she contact you?
No, but I've talked to John about this before, about having chickens, and from what I understand, I went through the zoning book and looked at it quite extensively, and there's nothing in there, and after talking to John, there's nothing. Am I correct on that,
You're
John?
correct, there are no regulations against that.
And so I think what, for example, is it's not just the urban chickens, but the lady that came into my office is, urban chickens is the one I always have a question about. This one lady that came through the office, she was looking at in workshops, I think it was either Cambridge City or Hagerstown.
I may not.
Okay, but it's dealing with, for example, front yards as far as the, say, using them as a garden space, because not everybody in the backyard, because of sunlight and so on, can use it. And this would be one, would be both comprehensive plan, and then also, for example, something with the city council as far as that you're exempting that from your nuisance, if this would be appropriate, to allow the use of the front yard for gardening, food gardening. I think some of you may be aware of, come across some of the, we've had some different cities, different parts of the country that someone has tried to turn their front yard into gardens, and the local zoning or the local code enforcement has said you can't do that. And it's kind of a gray area with the city code, but that might be a sort of thing that might be an exemption within the city code.
I know at this point, I've seen a couple that have, they were up on Virginia, there's a couple of houses that turn their front yards into, and I don't think that there's anything done with those.
No, and for example is, now if it's an appropriate thing, but it would make clear that in cases where you actually have, say, protective covenants in place, that's not going to overturn protective covenants. The other one, of course, is the city, it usually comes up maybe every couple of months, someone's asking about city chickens. Now, it might very well be that, because places that do have specific regulations, such as a South Bend is one, and then also Bloomington, frequently what's done is the zoning code goes ahead and actually allows, says specifically permits them, but frequently they're under either the animal codes or the health codes, which define, say, the number of chickens and how they have to be maintained. So that might be, one of the proposals, because that was something that it regularly comes up.
Are you suggesting that we then create something that says they allow it? I mean, 'cause if it's not in there, it's already allowed.
Yeah, it's to make it explicit. That, for example, you have these permitted uses, you have some things in the animals that say that, yes, for example, it's might be, say, city chickens are permitted within, say, these particular animal regulations of the city. Because the big one that places do have when they do it with the city chickens that do have these, is they specifically say no roosters. And so that would be where something like this would come in with, say, between the zoning code and then, say, the city code or something like this.
I was gonna ask that question, Bill. Fencing, it says use of the structure, fencing requirements, number of animals, animal density,
Yep.
and their management, which we've talked a lot about here. And then you say, and above all else, no roosters.
Yeah.
Well, at this point though, I mean, if it's not, if it's,
I'm kind of against roosters.
I mean, there's no rule against it, I mean, it's allowed. So if there's not a problem, I mean, it can always be handled as a common nuisance.
But do you want to relate on the nuisance when someone is someone that brings in a rooster? I'm saying, this is just, all I'm saying is that this is an item that was in working toward meeting the things that are recommended on the part of the Area Plan Commission. And part of it is you make explicit what's actually implied. And that's the general idea with the urban agriculture. Okay,
Where we at?
Okay.
Any discussion or motion or?
No, right now, it's just discussing everything. And so the idea is what are we gonna do for focus on next year? The other one is the home occupation regulations. And the idea is that, there's been a lot of work that's been done with it here locally. And I know most of us have been involved with the discussions of bringing those into the 21st century rather than relying on Depression era rules for the home occupations. Because there's a lot of things that are done without most of the preliminary work. Now, there's reference to, in the comprehensive plan for downtown zoning district, but I would recommend not actually dealing with that unless the city of Connersville is going to adopt a downtown historic district, because, that otherwise it would take a lot of work, but you need to have a reason to actually adopt those. And then to differentiate your zoning in your, say, downtown from the rest of the general business rules. And then we did a lot of work on the airport protection district, and I stepped back from that as far as moving forward anymore because of I didn't know what was really gonna happen at the time with with staff in the Area Plan Commission office. So with that, and then with what was, recommended with the Area Plan Commission as far as the plan review, because in the plan review area, it does take into consideration as what's going on in the area of the airport. And that would greatly, I think, simplify some of the things that are in place as far as, project review with, for the airport for the airport district. And what that would do, rather than a large, another section in the zoning code, it would really dovetail it with something that's been approved with the Area Plan Commission. Okay, then the additional actions were the satellite manure storage facilities. And then there's the, updating the rule that Fayette County and the city of Connersville used to adopt the state building codes. Because they have a new, there's a model ordinance that the Department of Homeland Security wants jurisdictions to adopt, and ensures that everything that we're enforcing is going to be phrased in a way that, so every time that there is a change to the one of the building codes in the state of Indiana, because we adopt them by reference, that every time the state of Indiana does adopt them, we're going to automatically be adopted. And the big one from the perspective of the Fire and Building Services is they really want your fee schedules out of the building codes and place those in the zoning code or some other ordinance. Because what happens is anytime you make any type of change to a local building code, because it's under the authority of the Fire and Building Services, before it can go into effect, the state of Indiana, the Fire Building Service, they have to approve your local building codes, adopting codes, before you can actually go into effect. It's much like the board members that were in place when we adopted remember the floodplain regulations? Because it's the same thing with the floodplain regulations. We can adopt, we forward to the state, and then we get the final approval from DNR to then be able to use the floodplain regulations. And it's the same thing with the building codes. And okay, this is what we're going with. This is these are the actual items, these 6 items, and I would recommend at this point maybe 2 items to focus on for next year in the annual plan.
Those being,
I think obvious number 1 is okay. What sort of action would be actions related to satellite manure storage facilities? And then on the part of the Area Plan Commission is with these other actions, what do you want me to focus my time on? Because we always have things, yeah, but what specifically? Because we know that there's always something else that's comes up. There's always a little bit of crisis management, something that ends up happening. So really, imagine that. So it's a matter of minimizing really the specific projects I'm taking on so that I can really put in the proper research and the effort into these projects.
what are you suggesting?
And I'm suggesting that number 1 is, satellite manure storage facilities should be something to look at as far as the annual plan for next year. Because as I said, we know it's going to bleed into next year. There's no way for December to have any type of ordinance for review and then also vote, and then to have sufficient public review and then also review by the elected officials. So I suggest that's 1. Now, the other item is, I think that views of the Area Plan Commission members of what else should I focus my efforts on for next year out of those other 5 items, whether it's urban agriculture, the home occupation regulations. I wouldn't go in the direction right now with downtown zoning. Okay, finishing things up with the airport protection district or the model zoning, doing something with the model, building codes.
The model building codes are proposed by the Department of Homeland Security, right?
Exactly, they have a model and the model is already in place, the basic model. It just requires some of the making changes. For example, the city and the county, they both adopt variations of the same code. Now, with the language that's in both is because I'm appointed by the county commissioners as the building commissioner. But what it is, the language is that the Fayette County Commissioners may choose to appoint the Area Plan Commission Director as the building commissioner, and that's always been the habit of doing so. And this gets into where the Area Plan Commission appoints the Director of the Area Plan Commission, but what the county commissioners actually do is to appoint the Director as the building commissioner. So
So is there a year that we have to come in compliance with this?
No, there isn't a specific year we have to come into compliance, but they just, there's always, you need to do this, you need to do this. But there is no legal mandate, period of time that we have to do it. Such as the things that have come up like, the ADA transition plans or things like that. We don't have that time frame. Now then, if we do finally then, between FEMA and the Division of Water, take that next step for finally adopting those floodplain maps, that we had the open house 2 years ago. Then there's a 90, it's either a 60-day or 90-day window then to have adopt the updated floodplain regulations and then get those approved by the state of Indiana. So, but that's pretty much the ordinance that we already have, and there might be some changes on the part of the model code that DNR uses.
So that floodplain deal would be part of number 2?
That would be something that we don't know when that's gonna happen. So that would be one of those,
Number 2.
lack of a better term, would be a crisis management moment.
Yes or no to this question?
Yeah. So well, it's not exactly yes or no, because I think we should say have that in there as if this comes up, then that should be an immediate priority when the time comes that those floodplain maps are adopted.
Are you getting a lot more increased traffic on urban farming? Is it grown from a year ago, 2 years ago?
Well, the question I had with the one lady that came into the office, I have her name back in the office, but that was the first time I've had that specific question, as far as front yard gardening. Now, it's usually maybe up to about a dozen times a year I've had questions about the urban chickens. Another one, a couple of times I've had is there's one gentleman who came to the office and asked about the beekeeping in the city. There's nothing with that, and I think your neighbors who garden would like to have the bees in the city. Now, this might be another thing, say in the animal warden, it might make clear that, yeah, you can raise the bees in the city if, that type of thing. Because otherwise, the idea is to make explicit what should be explicit rather than relying on something that's actually implied.
I think if there's no regulation or anything for it, so people can pretty much do whatever they want in the city as far as urban farming, there should be regulation on it. Not that we should tell people how to live their lives, but that's the difference between living in the city and the county.
Yeah, and it gets into the whole thing with like those front yards have been used places where then they got one was in Michigan, I think there's one in Ohio, and I forget where, another big one that made news is that you have someone who's trying to grow the produce, but it was the actual enforcement official was enforcing the code in a specific way because of gray area that said, no, you're violating the actual code right here, the nuisance code.
I would disagree with looking at the urban agriculture at this point. I mean, we got one ordinance enforcer.
Yep.
They're overwhelmed as it is, and to add something else to their plate that isn't really a priority, I don't think I really look at it at this point.
Okay.
I mean, if it's people can have chickens, then they can have chickens, and if they cause a problem, then that's a nuisance.
All right.
That's a public nuisance. I think it's covered.
Okay.
Bill, on the front page there under number 2, home occupation regulations, which says the preliminary work is completed, much of it is. Would that be something maybe that we could go ahead and
Yeah, I think
get
that's something.
completed this year?
Yeah, I think that's something we could easily complete, because most of it is getting to the point of because rather than you're familiar with how it's written right now, and it's for example, uses an ideal, typical home occupation is who does millinery anymore, much knows what millinery is. So it makes reference to, we've had significant changes in the medical profession, which might not necessarily be appropriate anymore because of the amount of staff and the number of patients that are seen. Might be not necessarily be appropriate anymore as a home occupation. There's other things that we've, through the years with the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board have allowed a lot of home occupations. Most of them seem to be, probably the largest number have been really hairdressing, home hairdressing. And interestingly, we had over a short period of time, there's 3 home pet grooming requests.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, but what it does, but you take an explicit look in there. I mean, you could read that home occupation regulations as stating that, okay, anybody who has an office in their home could conceivably be determined in violation with a absolute look at the home regulations, even if there's no visitors, there's no signs. It doesn't reflect the reality of working from home, doesn't reflect that there's people who do internet sales, things along those lines. It doesn't reflect really what's happening right now. And the idea of the home occupation is to protect residential uses from something that really doesn't fit within a residential neighborhood. And so, like I said, the idea is to bring it into this century.
Well, that's what, it's obvious that it's gonna be a lot of time consumed on satellite manure storage by you and this group. That's one, we've said that. And so maybe that would be the other thing. My suggestion would be, let's see if we've already got a lot of the preliminary work completed. Let's bring it out of the Depression era rules and get it up to date.
I agree with Ed on that one. I think this would help alleviate some of those concerns that are out there. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there. There'll be more home businesses pop up from here and there. There's lots more people working at home they're just working from their computers, so we don't want to stop folks from doing that because they're in a home office.
Because the idea is that you're seeing a shift to where there is no impact. Why do you require someone then to go before the boards to get the, permission?
I like that. I like that focus.
So that gives us our two then.
Do you need a motion to that effect?
Well, what I can do is then make a motion that should be the two priorities for next year. And what you might do then is, as an alternative, is to then have the floodplain regulations as a contingent.
So moved.
Second.
I didn't think that's supposed to make a motion.
We'll read what we're going to be voting on now.
I was going to ask, actually. The satellite manure storage facilities, I know, is number one, right?
Home occupation is second.
Home occupation, okay.
And then the floodway stuff,
Got
if
that.
it shows up, would kick in.
Okay, so satellite manure storage facility, number one. Home occupation, number two. Floodplain regulations
It's a contingent.
is a contingent. Okay.
And what I will do is I will then have a draft ready for the December meeting of that annual plan.
Okay, we need a vote on that.
Yes.
Everybody know what we're going to be voting on?
Yes.
Okay, call roll, please. Yea or nay?
Zane Bedore,
Nay.
Mark Flum,
Yes.
Ed Harrell,
Yes.
Carl Hilton,
Yes.
Jason Waterman,
Yes.
Gabe Nobby,
Yes.
Brian Jennings,
Yes.
James Barrett.
Yes.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 yes, 1 no.
Okay, it's passed by a vote of 7-1. Okay. The next item.
I think the next item gets us down to the director's report. And as it's been a while,
I had a chance to memorize that.
there's 3 months worth. But as you can see, it's actually one pretty,
I think I can read that.
I move to accept the
Second.
presented.
Moved and second, accept that. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. You're off the hook again.
yay!
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same.
Hey, sir.